So now we'd like to configure the rest of this TextView's properties for the purpose of this application. Now, one of the things that we did in the app was to make this text a lot larger, make it blue, center it, and also put some spacing around it so that it looked nice relative to the other components that were displayed on the screen. Now, when we're designing our GUIs in Android, we try to use what are called density independent pixels so that the operating system can scale your GUI components so they look exactly the same across wide varieties of screen sizes and pixel densities. So for example, a so-called density independent pixel is equivalent to one dot on a screen that has 160 dots per inch. So if I run an app on a device that has 160 dots per inch, and I say to set the size of this text to 40 density independent pixels, then on that 160 dpi device, each letter will be in 40 pixels size on the screen. But on a device that has 240 dots per inch, it will scale up that text to a larger size, because if it were to display at 40 pixels on a 240 dot per inch screen, then the text is going to look smaller on that higher pixel density screen. We want it to look exactly the same size. So the way it scales a density independent pixel for a 160 dpi screen up to a 240 dpi screen is it divides 240 by 160, which is 1.5, and then multiplies whatever size you specified by 1.5 to scale it appropriately for the higher density screen device. So by working with density independent pixels, you can make GUI components look like they're the exact same size on a 4-inch screen and on a 10-inch screen. And you can make images look like they're exactly the same size on a 4-inch screen versus a 10-inch screen, etc., etc. Now, in the context of fonts, we also use a kind of density independent pixel. We call it a scale independent pixel. Scale independent pixels are like density independent pixels, but they also factor in the user's preferred font size. And as of the time of this recording, users were not able yet to change their preferred font sizes on Android devices, but that is a feature that is expected to be added. So when we deal with text, we actually specify it as a scale independent pixel, and at some point in the future, scale independent pixels will be scalable by the user of the device. So for example, somebody who's hard of seeing might be able to increase the font size to make the text easier to read on the screen. So for the moment, scale independent pixels and density independent pixels are basically the same thing, but eventually scale independent pixels can be scaled by an additional factor defined by the user of the device. Now, to change the actual size of this text, what we're going to do is go to the text size property of the text view. We need to make sure it's selected so its properties are being displayed here. And let me scroll down to the text size property. Notice there's lots of different text properties that we can work with here. And for text size, I'm going to specify 40 SP, which stands for scale independent pixel. And notice that my text is now quite large. And in addition, I'd like to put some space above that in the user interface. And we can do that by setting the layout margins on this particular component. And specifically, we want to set what's called the layout margin top so that the text is off the top edge of the device. We're not going to worry about the left edge yet because, as you'll see, we're going to center this, which of course will leave some space on both the left and the right automatically. So let's go find the layout margin top property, and the layout properties are going to be in the MISC category underneath your properties window. And if I scroll down a little bit in there, you can see layout margin top is one of the items, and for the layout margin top I'm going to set it to 10 dp. So SP is used typically for fonts, DP is used for other sizes. And you can still specify fixed pixels with PX if you want. You can specify inches with IN and millimeters with MM if you like as well. But the vast majority of your measurements should be specified with density independent pixels, DP, or sometimes called DIP, or scale independent pixels, which is SP, and scale independent pixels are typically used just for fonts. And so now you'll notice that I have some gap at the top above my text view because of that setting. Now, some of the other properties that we want to set for the text view, again, I like to name my controls a little bit differently than the default that was given to me here. So I'm going to go change the ID of the text view. And every type of control has its ID property. So let me scroll down to that. And just so you can see the value that I'm setting here, the original value was @ plus ID / TextView1. I'm going to just name this Welcome Text View. And you can see it changes the name in the outline window. The other thing I'd like to do is change the color of this text. So I'm going to go back to my text properties. And you can see that I have a variety of text color attributes here. We have the text color highlight, the text color hint, and the text color link. So you can go into the documentation to look up what all of these different text color properties represent. And in fact, just as long as I mentioned that, let's go back to the docs for a second here. And on the reference tab, you have access to everything that's built into Android. You have all these different packages that represent the various components that you can use in an Android app. You can see lots of them start with Android dot, but there's also many of the Java dot packages from Java as well. And sometimes the easiest way to find something is just by searching the developer docs. So let's say I'm looking for the capabilities of a text view. I can type text view and you can see that it gives me everything that has the word text view in it. We're dealing with a text view widget, so I'll just go ahead and click that. And now I have the documentation for the text view, and if I scroll down to the latter parts of this documentation, you can see that it tells you what all these XML attributes represent. So if I scroll down to Android:text, I can see that's the text that's going to be displayed. The text color attribute represents the color. The text color highlight represents the color of the highlight when you select text on the screen, etc., etc. And each of these, it corresponds to one of the properties that we're seeing over in the properties window. Notice when I say text color in the properties window, the property name looks a little different from how it's actually represented in XML code. So text capital C color with no space in the XML versus text space color with different capitalization in the properties window. And the IDE is taking care of displaying those property names for you. It figures that out using some regular expressions that it applies to the actual properties of the given objects. Now, for our purpose, we wanted to set the color to just a blue color. So I'm going to say #00F, which stands for blue, 0 red, 0 green, and all blue. This is again the same as 0000FF if we would like. And when I do that, notice the color of my text changes. We also wanted to set the text style property. Notice when I click on that, I get an ellipsis button that gives me the ability to select different property values. I'm going to select bold in this case. So now I have a bold Welcome to Android App Development string being displayed on the screen. Now, we also wanted to center that text, and centering the text is done with a special property called gravity. And if you take a look here, we have our gravity property, and like the text style property, we get an ellipsis when we click on its value field, and these are all the values that we have for gravity for a given element. And in the case of this text view, what I really want is I want all of this text to be centered, so I'm just going to select center and click OK. And now, let me stretch out my design area a little bit here so you can see the whole width of the design area. Now you can see that the text is being centered within the text view. So at this point, we've gone ahead and completely configured our text view to represent what we want to be displayed on the final app. If I save this and go ahead and run it in my AVD, just so you can see it in action. Whoops. We'll wait for it to pull up on the screen here. At the moment it's installing that onto the device, and in a moment there we go. Here's our welcome app coming up onto the screen. White background, welcome to Android app development in bold blue, centered on the user interface with a little bit of margin at the top. In the next video we'll add in our images.